All right, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. This is NPA panel session. Thanks everyone for being here today. We're very fortunate to assemble a world-class panel to talk a little bit about, in the post-pandemic world, how the commuter patterns have changed and how does that impact when it comes to real estate, parking, mobility, and when it comes to technologies. What are some of the recommendations our panelists may have for the industry leaders and professionals? So to get started, first off, thank NPA for making this happen. This is the 2021 conference, an amazing opportunity to really get together and talk about the most timely important industry insights. So my name is Wen. I'm the CEO of Smarking, and Smarking is a San Francisco-based technology company working with many commercial real estate landlords, municipalities, and parking operators to essentially help them to turn their data into valuable insights and business results, as well as bringing the latest best AI and software technologies in the industry to help folks to do a lot better with their business. So today, I'm the moderator for a panel session. We have assembled a world-class panel. First, we have Rodolfo Pena from Miswitch, a multi-billion-dollar commercial real estate owner with a lot of focus on the retail side. And Rodolfo oversees the strategy and operations and business for all of their parking assets. We also have Peter Opoku from LaSalle Investment Management. And Peter oversees a portfolio of over $1.5 billion of assets. Peter has tremendous insights when it comes to parking after years of working with all kinds of parking assets on behalf of LaSalle, and oversees LaSalle's primarily the multifamily and residential side of the assets and business. We also have John Carlson from LaSalle Investment Management. John is the newly dedicated asset manager for all LaSalle's parking assets, as well as a big portfolio of commercial real estate assets, over $600 million of worth of assets. So again, today, thanks all panelists for joining us, and excited to learn from everybody when it comes to this new post-pandemic world. What are some of your observations and recommendations for the industry leaders and the parking professionals? Before we get into the meat and the potatoes, anything I'm missing here, panelists, when it comes to the introduction, what your expertise focus on?
I think you nailed it.
You got it.
Thanks, guys. So we have 3 sections designed for our session today. The first part is what Smarking has been learning and observing from the market. We work with real-time parking data from thousands of assets. We'll be able to share a little bit what has been our observation in terms of the market recovery, in terms of what is happening from just the year to date within 2021. Following that, we'll kick off a discussion to to ask all of our panelists to share their insights when it comes to market recovery, real estate, parking, everything. And then the third part, we may open the floor to the audience, see if there's any questions coming in. So without further ado, let's jump right in. So as many of you guys may have already observed on your end, what we're seeing from Smarking is looking at thousands of parking sites. Now here we sampled about 600 plus parking sites across North America, off-street locations, garages, and open surface lots. It looks to us, 2021, we came into the year with about 50% down compared to pre-pandemic in terms of total parking volume, transient and monthly, all aggregated up. And it seems like the recovery has been happening pretty nicely year to date. And then come to July, I think we were about, it looks like 75% recovered, which is great news, 3/4 recovered. But then clearly August, the latest data from our industry benchmark shows there's a little bit of a kind of sort of a drawback in a way that we would suspect that is from the Delta variant impact. So this is the total volume. Interestingly, if we break this down and take a look at 2 parts of the world within the parking world, we typically split it into transient and monthly, and then we can, to a certain extent, interpret that as what is happening when people are just drive and park out there doing all kinds of things versus going to work. It looks to us that although in the beginning of the year, monthly and transient recovery are pretty much on par with each other. Most recently, transient has been recovering a bit faster across the board than the monthly parking. To us, that to a certain extent means on one hand, people are out and about doing things, but when it comes to return of the workforce, there may be a little bit of a lag over there. And sometimes even when workforce are coming back, with the new kind of the hybrid working mode, they may be shifting to transient parking is some of the possible kind of causes. So if we take a quick look, so this is across the board from North America perspective. If we take a quick look at the several major metropolitan areas, some other interesting findings we've got is, let's say, for example, Boston. Looks to us that by July, August, transient is pretty much on par in terms of recovery compared to before pandemic, 2019. But monthly is still down close to 40 or so percent, more than 35% or so. So this is when it comes to, we sampled about 60 plus locations in the Boston area. Similar trend is being observed in Chicago region as well. So the delta is even bigger. Looks like by summer, Chicago summer is obviously lovely, and the transient is already beating 2019, which is fantastic news. But from the monthly perspective, we still have about more than 35 or so percent kind of a gap. And then if you look at the delta, that's still there. So there is that difference. And if we look at on the West Coast from the Los Angeles metro area, it looks like, yeah, the things have been pretty rough on the West Coast. Beginning of the year, we were down more than 60%. Now we're a lot better. I'd say, relatively speaking, a lot better. But still, there's a long way to go for us to get to the full recovery. We're not saying that this is absolutely the truth of the universe, not at all. But these are just some of the data sample points that we've got. I will have a panel question prepared to get everybody's input from the panelists shortly to see if this is something that you're seeing in your region and in your markets as well. Before that, very quickly, within Smarking, we also did some of the research on the transit side as well as on ride shares. Wanted to quickly share here. So from a public transportation perspective, one thing that we've learned from different data sources is that it's pretty clear. A lot of people are driving and parking in this post-pandemic world. Now, when it comes to public transportation, the chart you're looking at here is one of the largest transit system, MBTA, in the Boston region. So those two curves, it shows the gray curve shows the ridership in 2020 and the green curve shows the ridership in 2021. And it looks to us that toward the beginning of Q2 and of Q1, the recovery is still about just 25% pre-pandemic. So that's a public transportation as just one data points. And we have gathered some other information from different data sources. Essentially, a lot of people with the view that the recovery of public transportation may take years, not months, to really come back. And from a ride share perspective, what we have also learned from different data sources in the market is the chart you're looking at here is actually from Uber. Basically, the blue columns are the quarterly ridership, quarterly revenue from Uber rides. The yellow bar, those are the Uber Eats. So it's pretty clear that food delivery is growing quite fast, but the blue bar is still pretty much half of what is kind of on the pre-pandemic level. So about 50% of recovery for ride shares when it comes to the rides. So with all of that being said, here comes our first panel question. Is this something that panelists you were seeing in your market? I know Rudy is seeing a lot of retail assets, and John is on the commercial side, and Peter has a lot of observation on the residential side. Would love to hear your observation, your kind of view on what has been the recovery from your perspectives. Please go ahead, Rudy.
Thank you, Wen. Appreciate it, and thank you for having us over. So, I mean, I don't know if everybody's been seeing sort of like the same results that we have been seeing, but the start of the year was obviously pretty slow for everybody. I think through April, pretty much March, April, we were really struggling to bring back our our traffic, our revenues, or transient, or monthlies, you name it. But things started to take a change in May and June. That's when like started to really pick up, and then July is when we really kicked it into high gear. Now, most of my parkers and most of our parkers, I guess I should say, are retail parkers, right? And then monthly employees that are composed from retail employees or people that are in the nearby offices. So it depends on which market you look at, really. Some of our markets had stronger returns than others, where we have employees coming back to work, right, that are parking in the mall. But then when you look at, markets where you have a lot of office employees, a lot of companies are now switching into these hybrid schedules, right, where the employees only go to work twice a week, or only, they stay from, work from home for most of the week. So we really have seen an impact on those markets where, we've lost some monthly parkers. And as you mentioned, some of those monthly parkers converted into transient parkers. So it's been kind of all over the place. But like I said, June and July, it's where really, where everything really took a turn for the better. So just looking forward what's going to happen for the rest of the year.
That's great to hear. Thank you, Rudy, on that. So one quick follow-up on that is typically, I don't know if this is the case for everybody, but intuitively, people would think for retail, most of the parkers are going to be from transient side. And when it comes to merchants, employees, not sure if it is the case, but even before pandemic, these folks may have different shifts already. Is that the case or not really the case to your observation?
Yeah, I mean, some people remain sort of the same, honestly. Some people kind of, stay with like the different schedules. But right now, everything is changing. It's sort of changing with the new landscape of parking. It's sort of like evolving, and as everyone's schedules are changing, and as people are coming in or, not riding the transient anymore, people are, reverting back to having a vehicle, whereas before they were like sort of like relying a little bit more on public transportation. So there has been some change for sure.
Okay. Thank you, Rudy. And Peter, how do you see that from what you have observed year to date on the residential side and for the regions that you pay a lot of attention to?
Right. So before I answer that, thanks for having us here, and it's always good to share some thoughts on parking. So I'll comment on the multifamily side, and I think Rudy hit on a point right before towards the end of his, where people have moved away from taking public transportation and are now, opting to own their own car. So in our apartment buildings, starting middle of last year, we started seeing an uptick in parking income because, folks are all of a sudden now need to have a car. So they're getting a parking space that's part of their lease. So we started getting, wait lists for parking spaces in our buildings. And this was not an issue we had pre-pandemic. Another thing, and this is idiosyncratic just because of where the property is located. I've got an apartment building on the Upper West Side that, because street closures happened and a lot of, street parking was taken away because of COVID to make space for, restaurants and stuff to have outdoor seating. All those outdoor parkers are now parking in my public garage, in my apartment building, which I actually use dynamic pricing from SmartKing to, play around my rates. But, that's something that we didn't have pre-pandemic. It was very stable demand for parking space there. Now, by noon, the full sign is up, whereas we never had to put a full sign up for that garage. So there's some of these changes that I don't know if they're here to stay, but in the interim, it's been a positive for multifamily parking.
That's amazing. So because of the pandemic, more people are driving and parking, and then all of a sudden also less supply on the street. So for the residential buildings, are you charging them for parking? That's the key question.
I mean, we have to.
Right. That's the key answer. You gotta, yeah, when the opportunities show up, you gotta capture those. Thank you very much, Peter. How about from the commercial side, John? What are some of the signals that you're getting?
Yes, definitely. First of all, thank you for having me. Excited to be on this panel. And anecdotally, on building off Peter's point, I was one of those residents who bought a car during the pandemic for the first time and needed to find a parking space. So in my new apartment, I made sure to bundle my parking space in with my rent. But shifting more to the commercial side, I think the Chicago chart you presented, we have a garage in Chicago that would definitely reflect that sort of high tick up in transient. And I think that shows a more macro impact that tourism is having on our parking and commercial assets. I moved to our Miami assets. We have one in downtown Miami where the demand is fully driven by office parkers, and that one is still lagging behind. But we're seeing record number of transient parkers because of events at the Performing Arts Center nearby. There's so many people looking to go out and do events that we are partially buffering our lack of monthlies, not by any means back to status quo, and then moving from downtown Miami, where again, it's all office centric, to our South Beach garage is hitting absolutely record numbers. Twofold, one being that kind of like Peter and the Upper West Side, they're closing off streets to be pedestrian only, which then our nearby garage is gaining a huge advantage there, both from the valets of the hotels and just for your regular parkers. And again, the tourist levels are just at record highs in South Beach. So they're looking for anywhere available to park. And so we've really benefited from there. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, obviously, and within my office portfolio, we are kind of tracking our parking numbers pretty much to match our physical occupancy numbers. Some of our office buildings have been hovering only at about 20% of what they were pre-pandemic, which we're tracking just through card swipes to access the building. And our monthly parkers obviously are kind of reflecting that same physical occupancy number. So it's really looking forward how we can be more flexible with those monthly parkers at our office assets to match what I think was mentioned earlier, the flexible work, the people only working 2 or 3 days in the office, which Smarking I know is working on to give that more flexible opportunity and really enhance and encourage people to come back to the office at least a few days to remind them of the enjoyable work experience that they can have there.
Thank you, John. Very comprehensive observations in different markets, Chicago, Miami, different areas. So the major thing I took away is, on one hand, it seems like when it comes to tourism activities, there's definitely an uptick when it comes to the parking volume from these activities. But when it comes to office workers coming back, there is a major shift of the landscape, and more people are probably driving and parking, but from the physical occupancy from the buildings to parking volume, they're saying the same things essentially. There's still some of the some distance for us to catch up on when it comes to recovery. This is very, very informative and insightful, panelists. Thank you so much. So then, if we say we've talked about what we have seen so far year to date 2021, recovery is happening. More people are driving and parking, but landscape has shifted significantly from retail to multifamily to office. What if we ask our panelists to say, okay, how do you see the future? How do you see in the next 6 to 18 months, even 24 months, the world is gonna head toward? Where do you think the world is head toward? Would love to. I understand predicting the future is hard, but it's always helpful to hear from the best insightful experts. So this time we'll reverse order. So we'll go first with John. From a commercial side, what do you think is going to be anticipated from both, let's say, the office space as well as parking perspectives when it comes to the next 6 to 18 to 24 months?
Definitely. From the office perspective, I think the flexible in-office policy is here to stay. I think almost every company will have a significant in-office presence, but I don't think it will necessarily be the 5 days a week anymore. And then as in relation to parking, that means we have to be somewhat more agile in what we're offering those tenants. Obviously, in a perfect world, all our office tenants are still going to pay the full monthly freight for their employees, but I'm not sure that they're going to be willing to do that. And how I view a lot of our parking garages within our office buildings is it can give us a leg up when we're trying to do new leasing or when we're trying to retain the tenants. parking should be a major amenity when you're an office user. And as we mentioned earlier on, a lot more people bought cars. They're less inclined to take public transit. So if we're going to get them back in the office, we have to have a parking garage that fits that high quality Class A office that we're offering them. So overall, I'm anticipating needing to be a little bit more flexible with our monthly rates, but I'm confident that our office tenants will come back because there is just that next level of inner work correspondence and interactions that you can't get virtually. Pivoting actually then to another aspect of a lot of my portfolio is also grocery anchored retail. And throughout the pandemic, we've obviously seen a spike in grocers have in people grocery shopping again. And so obviously our parking has done well as well. People were more tepid to return to restaurants. They were cooking more, they were learning to cook more. And I think they enjoy that. So I think we'll continue to see strong foot traffic at our grocery anchored shopping centers. It's something that is also here to stay, and to advantage then stronger parking at those retail assets as well.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Thank you, John. So essentially, the firm belief is the world has changed, that the flexible work schedule is here to stay. But clearly, parking is the kind of the start point and end point of every tenant's everyday life when they come into a building. That is going to be important. When it comes to lease or just simply provide options to tenants to keep them there, seems like it's going to be important to provide that option experience to them. That is amazing. Thank you, John. So Peter, how about when it comes to the residential side? How does this, you think, what would impact the world in the next 6 to 24 months?
Yeah, I mean, from a revenue side, I hope a lot of the strings that have been attached to pedestrian only roads, I hope those things stick for a while. I mean, what I'm hearing is a lot of residents in those neighborhoods have enjoyed pedestrian only streets, so it's going to be difficult for the counties or whatever municipalities to revert those streets back to automotive use. So that, I hope, is something that sticks around for the next 6 to 24 months. One thing that is gathering a lot of steam is EVs. So I think there's going to be increased demand for EV charging stations in garages, and with that comes, if your garage doesn't have a paywall, now it's an opportunity for you to generate some income by installing a gate or something to have people come and charge their cars in your garage. So I see revenue from EV cars charging as a potential revenue stream in the next 6 to 12, 24 months. Some counties are actually requiring you to have a fixed number of EV charging stations in your garage if you're building a new garage. So I see this trend accelerating. And then fractional parking. So what do I mean by that? There are some markets where another parking garage or another parking lot cannot be built, and there's been a ton more cars in markets than some of these markets can handle. And so if you're having 10 spots for every 20 cars and all these guys want to park their cars, I think Smarting is probably already onto this, but I think there's going to come a point where this one spot, Peter has it Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Wen has it Tuesday, Thursday. So I can see fractional parking picking up to sort of dealing with the demand that's coming once things return to normal. Because a lot of people forget that these cars that have been acquired, they're not going anywhere. Like, they need to still find a place to live. So even if the pandemic is much less crazy than it is right now, there's still going to be demand for parking. So I think fractional parking is definitely something that's going to come up, and Smarting is set up to eat that up.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah.
Very insightful. So on one hand, with more cars, more EVs, clearly with this hybrid work schedule, people are going to have the need to charge their car in the buildings. Better have that infrastructure ready. On the other hand, the utilization of the assets, the parking assets, are going to be, as you said, fragmented or what was the word? Basically,
fractional. So basically,
Right.
because there just isn't enough parking to go around in certain
Right.
markets, you
Yeah.
need to divvy up the time.
Enabling all kinds of flexible options essentially to increase that utilization of the assets is kind of sort of sounds like the key there. Thank you very much, Peter. Rudy, how about from a big shopping centers retail perspective, what do you think is going to be the outlook in the next 6 to 24 months in your view?
So, I mean, I'd hate to repeat everything that John and Peter said, but I agree with them. I mean, especially starting with John and what he said about the flexible, schedule, it's here to stay. And I agree 100%. I think companies are starting to realize that their employees are just as productive when they're, having these flexible schedules. And so that's going to affect people differently, right? I mean, some people have more monthlies, some people and then others. I mean, I have a lot of office employees that park in some of our assets, but some of our assets are mostly transient parking, right? And where do I see the transient parking going in the next 24 months? I think it's coming back. I don't think it's going to take as long as some people predict for parking to come back, because we've seen in a lot of markets that we're already beating 2019 numbers. And people were eager to get out. People were eager to go out and eat. And although I agree 100% with what John is saying, that people are also enjoying cooking at home and doing all these things, there's a lot of people, right? And there's also the other side of the coin, that you have the people that are like just done doing all that, right? They want to get out of the house. They want to go to the park. They want to go to the movies, right? So and I agree with you, Peter. I'm right there with you. I'm the first guy that when they lifted the bans here in LA, I was out and about, man. I needed some peace of mind. I needed to get out and then get out of my house, get out of my four walls. So to that point, transient, it's coming back, and it's coming back with a full force. Now some markets are, it's coming back a little stronger than others, but I believe that in the next 24 months we're going to be looking at 2019 numbers and blowing those numbers out of the water, hopefully.
That's amazing. So from a volume standpoint, to your point, Rudy, basically the view is that we're all social animals, want to get out there and then do stuff. And when it comes to destinations like big shopping centers, clearly there's so much there for us to experience, and the volume is going to come back and then even beat the pre-pandemic numbers in its kind of high level sense.
Right.
Yeah, that's absolutely encouraging. So then what our view, panelists, from both what we have seen so far in terms of what we can see in the next 6 to 24 months, what is your view on the implication of the shifted demand patterns when it comes to real estate, different kind of real estate and parking, when it comes to the biggest challenges, the biggest opportunities? And from a landlord perspective, what do you think are the biggest needs and priorities, both from just business perspective and technology perspective, if you could comment on that? And we'll start with Peter for this one.
So I think, the big impact here for an owner is how much of your assets revenue is parking. So if I've got an apartment building that generates $10 million a year in rental revenue, and parking revenue is only, call it $300,000, am I too pressed about my parking income if it dwindles a little bit? Probably not. But if it was the reverse, where I've got 10 million of parking revenue, and if I don't figure out how to keep the revenue afloat, I'm going to drop down to like $3 million, and then that asset's value is heavily impacted because of that drop in revenue. That owner needs to figure out how do I maximize what I have? Because a lot of things won't change. If you're in a location where office demand isn't coming back, you need to figure out what to do with your parking garage. There are things that some companies are exploring with ghost kitchens, with storage for bikes. Like there's so many ways that people are trying to monetize parking, and it all depends on where you're located. If you're in a market where tourism is coming back with a bang, like Miami, you have nothing to worry about. The future looks bright for you, and it's just how much money you do want to make. So I think the question here is, how hungry are owners how hungry are they to try and shore up asset value if parking is a huge component of that asset's value. So if parking is a drop in the bucket for your asset, you probably aren't too concerned about these demand shifts. But if parking drives the value of your asset, then you're concerned, and you need to figure out how to get people to your garage. I'm sure John probably mentioned this, but one of our assets at LaSalle, now we're actually providing parking to the staff of one of the baseball teams in the US. Like it wasn't something that was ever on our radar, but COVID happened. They're doing some things at their stadium. They needed parking. We needed to shore up our parking revenue because that is a parking garage. And if you don't have parking revenue, where's the value in the asset? So we figured, hey, let's try and play ball with these guys, and here we are. So if you're hungry to shore up your value, you're going to figure out a way to do it. And I think this market is giving us an opportunity to figure out very, very interesting ways to generate revenue from our parking assets. I don't know if I answered your question, but
I think so. My takeaway is simply that clearly landscape is shifting. And if you put your head in the sand and don't do anything, then trouble. If you do see the opportunities of making changes, like what you said, there are blueprint opportunities like the sports teams like you never think of, but if you pay attention to it, stay hungry, as you said. That's also Steve Jobs said that, right? Stay hungry. If you wanted to just maximize every bit of the opportunity out of your assets, there are opportunities, right? As you said, that there are opportunities you can think of. You gotta explore and gotta do something about it to essentially get onto it. Is my takeaway, right? Yeah. Okay, thank you, Peter. All right, John, what do you think when it comes to Office? Clearly, major changes. What do you think are some of the biggest challenge, biggest opportunity, and business, technology, everything?
Definitely. I think some office asset managers may be a little complacent with their parking revenue. They may just use it as what Peter was touching on. It's not their main focus. It's less of the revenue driver, but a lot of our office assets, it's still significant. It can be over $1 million easily a year, and that's a huge needle mover that they're kind of tending to let operators just handle it on their own and being more passive. And what I've come through in the past is noticed a lot of our parking equipment is well behind the normal technologies of today. We're operating on Windows. I don't even know what Windows platform it is, where I'm surprised it's still working anymore. And we're losing revenue opportunities because we're still faxing information across parking garages. This is an opportunity to re-examine our technology within our parking garages to make us more efficient. Our on-site staff probably isn't handling as much of your daily parkers, so can give us time to really re-examine what we need to make sure that the asset is ready when all of our office tenants come back. Peter touched on it earlier. I think he's using it up in the Upper West Side, but dynamic pricing is definitely something that we'll be looking more and more into in the future. It makes sense. We're in the 21st century. We need to be able to have that flexible pricing instead of just putting a sign out at the front of our garage at the beginning of the day and hoping that that's the right price and that'll drum business. Word of mouth is great, but we have a lot of data that we can now actually use and make us more agile in the office market.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So essentially, the world is changing, but clearly there's a gap between what we had before the pandemic now to what the world is calling for when it comes to the equipment, the experience for parkers. Make it easy for people to pay you, right? If you wanted to make parking big, parking can be a big opportunity, is what I'm getting. And when it comes to being able to rely on data to make decisions, enable dynamic pricing, provide options to the parkers to let them pay you, to let them use your service is kind of sort of clearly, I mean, it sounds like, of course, but yeah, it takes that calling out to, actually make people realize that, oh yeah, what are we doing here, right? Thank you, John. Okay, Rudy, what are some of your thoughts when it comes to, this coming months and years when it comes to the challenges, biggest opportunities, and, business technologies? What are some of your thoughts on the implications and what they, yeah.
So I think one of the biggest challenges for us is, how do we set ourselves apart from the rest, right?
Mhm.
With as many transient parkers as we're having flock into our garages, it's a question of what do we have to offer that the others don't have to offer, right? How do we bring people into our garages? Whether if it's by the use of technology, making it easier on them, making the parking as frictionless as possible, right? Making sure that your garage stands out in front of the others, and making sure that they use that. So that challenge creates that opportunity, right? Of having that ability to bring that parker in by, like John said, maybe using dynamic pricing, right? Making sure that your price it's competitive to what's in the market. And using other aggregators, right? Making sure that these days people are able to basically find, pay parking all within the touch of our hands, right? It's being able to keep up with that technology that's going to really set us apart. So that's going to be both a challenge and an opportunity for everyone, I think.
Awesome. Thank you, Rudy. You already touched on this. So this has been a very insightful panel, and now comes to the last point. Would love to get some recommendations from all panelists, and Rudy, you already touched on some of these. So if we start with you, what are some of your recommendations to real estate professionals and leaders and parking leaders in this coming days and years? What should they pay attention to? What's your recommendation?
So the same recommendation that I mentioned back when we had that that conference or that panel during the pandemic last year. Stay nimble, right? You have to stay nimble in this market right now, because everything is so fluid, especially with the parking landscape. Everything is changing so much, and you need to be able to keep up with that change. So and what I mean by that is bring in technology as much as you can, right? A lot of parkings are going out gateless, right? There's a lot of technologies out there where people don't even need to pull a ticket to get into the garage, right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously this doesn't make sense to every model, but we're getting there. We're getting to the point where in the future, in the next 10 years, there probably won't ever be a gate arm in any garage anymore, right? Everything is going to be fully automated. So my recommendation is just be able to keep up with that change, right? Be flexible and set yourself apart from the competition.
Right. Stay nimble. Don't be fixated on certain particular views, but watch the market at the same time. See where the opportunities are, where the challenges are at all times, essentially. I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Rudy. Peter, what are your recommendations? What are some of your recommendations to real estate professionals, parking leaders?
I think Rudy hit it spot on, because if you ignore what's going on and as you said, put your head in the sand and think, it's just going to blow past. It's not. It's here to stay, and you need to adapt your operations to the changing times. So if everyone's garage is using LPR, guess what? You need to use LPR. And the good thing with these tech changes is the more adaptation or adoption that they get, the cheaper they will become over time. So in a couple of years, I'm pretty sure LPR is going to be very, very affordable, and no one's going to need a ticketing system that spits out paper tickets. You pull into a garage, your license plate number is pulled into a system, and you can probably just have the bill just go straight to your phone, and you can pay without even swiping your card anywhere. So there are a lot of tech changes that I can see coming down the pike, and if you're not willing to accept it, you're just going to be left in the dust. Yeah,
I see. It says follow the trend. Don't be left behind. If there are new convenient technologies, good technologies that enables better experience,
right.
For parkers, for everybody, just get onto them and embrace those things.
Right. And the good thing is, like, you can try it, and if it doesn't work, you can stop it.
Right.
A lot of these services, it's 30 days you can cancel. So
right.
there's no harm in trying.
Nice. Okay. Wonderful. All right. Now come to you, John. When it comes to, based off all that we just talked about, the pandemic clearly made a dent to how all we live, work, hybrid work mode, everything. More people driving and parking. What are some of your final recommendations to real estate professionals, leaders, parking professionals, everybody in this world trying to figure it out?
Yeah, I'm pretty much going to be repetitive. I think make it easy for the parker. It sounds simple, but again, I'm really approaching this from the office mindset. A lot of these consumers have been home for the last 18 months, and they haven't been commuting. And if they go to a parking garage and it's difficult for them to pull a ticket or difficult for them to pay, or they're waiting behind 6 cars because one person doesn't have the right payment method. Okay. Anyways, that will frustrate them and they may not come back. They may just continue to drift to the remote work, and everything in the office landscape has to be seamless because we're on the defensive now. And so with parking, again, it needs to be a positive amenity, obviously cash flow producing positive amenity from our eyes, but we need to incentivize the parker to stay and keep coming back. And so it is what we already touched on. It's the technology, it's the ease of use, it's making everyone be comfortable and really be tech savvy where the whole world is moving. Parking should follow that as well.
Amazing. Be tech savvy. That's a verb there. Make it easier. Make the experience really good for the people who are using your service. That's, I think, it really comes down to the core of that. If people want scan out, let them. Don't let them have to feel like they have to touch things. If they wanted flexible options, give them those options. You can charge them premium, but give them those options. Make it easy for them to pay you. Still, I'd say parking can be a big business and should be. And by embracing technologies, this is our view as well. Make it easier for people to use your service. The good things would happen is how I would look at it. But yeah, thank you all so much, panelists. Amazing discussion. So we're pretty much at the time mark here. And again, just really appreciate all your insights and your time here. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Today we have a great panel assembled for the NPA conference.